Well, hey, today is Saturday after Easter, or Saturday within the octave of Easter, the 8 days that follow Easter Sunday itself and the second Sunday of Easter. And there's been a thought that's been rolling through my mind during this week. Each week we read the different resurrection appearances of Jesus in the final chapters of each gospel. One of the things that strikes me is how in all of them Jesus either shows his hands and feet or his hands and side to the disciples when he appears to them. And that raises a question for me. Why didn't God close up the holes? It appears that the marks of the nails, the mark of the soldier's lance that pierced Jesus' side and his heart, are still there, even though the rest of his wounds from the scourging and crucifixion appear to be healed, as he's now risen and glorified. It's always a bit of a dangerous thing to speculate on the mind of God, but it seems to me that the Gospels suggest at least a couple of reasons as to why possibly these particular wounds of Jesus might have remained. One of them is suggested particularly by Luke and John. In Luke 24, we're told that on the evening of the first day of the week, that is on Easter Sunday, Jesus appears where the 11 and the other disciples are gathered. And they're startled. They're afraid. They think maybe they're seeing a ghost. And Jesus tells them not to be afraid. It is I. He shows them his hands and his feet and tells them, touch me and see, because a ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you can see, I have. Luke doesn't specifically say that the wounds are still there, but John is more explicit. In John 20, we have the similar appearance of Jesus, this time showing him his hands and his side on the evening of the first day of the week. And then a week later, this will be our gospel reading for tomorrow, the second Sunday of Easter. Thomas is with them, and Jesus invites Thomas to probe the wounds in his hands and bring his hand and put it into the wound in his side. And this encounter with Jesus' wounds brings St. Thomas from doubt to great faith, declaring, my Lord and my God. So one of the reasons it appears perhaps that God didn't close up the holes is that it validates or verifies Jesus' identity. This is the same Jesus whom the apostles and the other disciples traveled with through Galilee and Judea, whom they heard speaking, preaching, and teaching, whom they ate and drank with, who they saw curing diseases and driving out demons, and yes, whom they saw crucified and laid in a tomb. And now he has truly been raised. And these wounds help to verify that this is indeed the same Jesus. That encounter with St. Thomas and his deep and profound expression of faith that comes from probing Jesus' wounds points to a deeper reason as to perhaps why God didn't close up the holes when Jesus rose from the dead. And that is the way that it really fulfills God's plan. We hear that Jesus told the apostles many times that they were going to Jerusalem. He would die, and on the third day he would be raised. This is what is written of the Son of Man in the Scriptures. We also see in the resurrection appearances, particularly in Luke's account, that Jesus then goes back and opens up the Scriptures for them, the Old Testament, as we would call it, to see all the things that referred to him and show that it was necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and so enter into his glory. One of those Scripture passages is known as the Song of the Suffering Servant. It's found at the end of Isaiah 52 and continues into Isaiah 53. This is where it speaks about God's servant, who had no beauty or comeliness to attract our eyes, who appeared to be smitten by God and afflicted, scorned by the people. Yet it was our infirmities that he bore, and it was by his wounds that we are healed. And indeed, those wounds of Jesus in his hands, his feet, and his side, now transformed and glorified by his resurrection, that show that indeed this scripture passage has been fulfilled. It's the encounter with those wounds that brings St. Thomas into deep resurrection faith. Those wounds are now the source of eternal salvation, the source of grace for us in our lives. I've been pondering that a bit. It's a question that comes up often for me. It's come up often in people that I encounter in ministry, and those are at least a couple of thoughts as to perhaps why God didn't close up the holes when Jesus rose from the dead. I hope you found that helpful, and have a blessed day.